June 1944. While the beaches of Normandy fill with blood and steel, and the roar of machine guns echoes across northern France, a silent operation, hidden behind the front lines, is deciding the course of the war without firing a single shot. The Second World War was won with tanks, planes, and courage, but it was also won with lies, ingenious, calculated, strategically placed lies. And perhaps no lie was as decisive as the one told through Operation Fortitude, an elaborate show of smoke and mirrors that convinced Hitler to look at the wrong place at the wrong time. Europe, 1943. The Third Reich still occupies much of the continent. The USSR is carrying the weight of the war in the east, with millions of lives already lost in the trenches of Kursk and Stalingrad. In the west, the Allies are regrouping after success in North Africa and the liberation of Sicily. But one question hangs in the air among the generals under Eisenhower, Churchill, and Montgomery. How do you invade occupied Europe without being massacred on the beaches? The answer: you deceive Adolf Hitler. But deceiving Hitler was more complex than it sounded. The German High Command, the OKW, had one of the most powerful military intelligence networks in the world. The eyes and ears of the Abwehr, the German intelligence service, were in every corner of Europe, and for every wrong step, tens of thousands of Allied soldiers could die. It was necessary to create an illusion so real, so convincing, that even the best analysts in the Wehrmacht would fall for it. And that is how Operation Fortitude was born. Fortitude was not just an operation. It was a psychological theater of war, split into two main acts: Fortitude North, which simulated an invasion of Norway by the United Kingdom; Fortitude South, the centerpiece of the hoax which convinced Hitler that the real Allied landing would be at Pas de Calais, not Normandy. The logic was simple. Calais was the closest point between England and France, the obvious choice for an attack, but that obvious choice became the trap, and the Allies were ready to feed that assumption with every dirty trick in the espionage handbook. In 1944, the southern coast of England seemed packed with landing craft, Sherman tanks, and entire divisions of infantry, or at least that's how it looked. In reality, much of what German reconnaissance planes saw was military stagecraft, inflatable tanks, fake tents, wooden aircraft, and even railway tracks that led nowhere. The name of this phantom formation, the 1st U.S. Army Group, FUSAG, supposedly commanded by the general most feared by the Germans, George S. Patton, temporarily removed from actual command after the infamous slapping incident in Sicily, was turned into a living chess piece. The Allies knew how much respect and fear the Germans had for him, so they used him as bait. According to declassified files, the Germans kept intercepting false FUSAG communications, logistics reports, marching orders, troop movements, all carefully written and transmitted to look legitimate. It was a banquet of disinformation, served with such skill that the Abwehr itself confirmed the attack would come through Calais. But every hoax needs good actors, and Fortitude had some of the best. Among them was Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, a Spanish spy who tricked the Germans so effectively that he was decorated by both sides during the war. He built a fictitious network of 27 agents who in reality did not exist. Through them, he fed the Germans carefully filtered information, blending irrelevant truths with strategic lies. Garbo was the conductor of an orchestra the Germans didn't even realize was being conducted. According to MI5 reports, the Germans trusted his information so much that they praised his dedication to the Reich's cause. In 1944, he was awarded the Iron Cross, despite secretly working for the British, and he was not alone. The British network of double agents, under the double cross system, turned German intelligence into an echo chamber of its own illusions. Every message, Every fabricated detail was passed along with almost theatrical care. As British officer Sir John Masterman put it, they didn't know they were being deceived, they only knew they were right. In the early hours of the 6th of June 1944, 156,000 Allied soldiers landed on the beaches of Normandy. It was the largest amphibious attack in history, but the success of that bloody operation was not guaranteed only by rifles and machine guns. It was guaranteed by doubt. Hitler refused to move his elite divisions from Calais to Normandy for 2 weeks. He was convinced that Normandy was just a diversion, that the real attack was still coming, an attack that never existed. That hesitation was costly, and it was exactly what the Allies had hoped for. While the 15th Panzer Division waited for orders in Calais, American, British and Canadian soldiers were digging in on the beaches of Normandy. The time the Germans wasted waiting for a phantom invasion was the time the Allies needed to secure their foothold. A German general would later write in his diary, "We were defeated by armies that never arrived, and generals who were never there." Operation Fortitude saved thousands of Allied lives, but it also raised deep ethical questions. What is acceptable in a war where any truth can be fatal? How far can you go to deceive the enemy? The men and women behind Fortitude worked in the shadows, knowing that their success would never be celebrated in public squares. There were no medals for invisible spies, only the weight of silent decisions that changed the course of history. If Operation Fortitude was a grand spectacle of deception, its authors were war playwrights, capable of reshaping reality with words, radios, and forged maps. As Winston Churchill once said, "In war, truth is so valuable that it must always be protected by a bodyguard of lies." Even after the success of D-Day, the Fortitude hoax was not abandoned. On the contrary, it was intensified. While Allied soldiers slowly advanced through Normandy, fighting town by town, village by village, under heavy fire, Allied intelligence kept feeding the Germans false messages. The Fusag story was still alive. On paper, Patton was still waiting for the perfect conditions to lead the real attack on Calais, and Hitler still believed it. Only at the end of July 1944, more than a month and a half after the landings, did the German High Command finally accept that the main attack would not come through Calais. Until then, 19 German divisions had been held in the region, waiting for an enemy that would never appear. That delay gave the Allies enough time to launch Operation Cobra, break out of the Normandy pocket, and begin the race toward Paris. If Fortitude had opened the doors of Europe, Cobra kicked them wide open. Behind Operation Fortitude there was an even deeper structure of disinformation, a true web of manipulation built with surgical patience. Between 1940 and 1943, MI5 and the Special Operations Executive SOE had managed to turn practically every German spy in the United Kingdom into a double agent. According to double-cross system records, these agents provided the Germans with exactly what they wanted to hear, no more, no less. The Allies understood early on that partial truth was more convincing than a blatant lie, so the reports sent to Germany mixed genuine but irrelevant information with carefully calibrated fabrications. One example is Agent Tricycle, a Yugoslav who worked under British control while reporting to Germany. He helped simulate Fusag's movements through letters exchanged with other agents, all of them fictitious characters created by British intelligence. These letters were accidentally intercepted and passed on to the Abwehr as proof that the attack would indeed come through Calais. The ironic part, the Germans did suspect he might be a double agent, but chose to trust him because his information matched what they already wanted to believe. Hitler was obsessed with strategy, maps and data, but he was also paranoid and believed the British were masters of deception, which ironically became the perfect opening for Fortitude's success. German command believed the Normandy landings were just a feint, part of a broader diversion. The German dictator was convinced that a second, larger and more devastating landing would follow soon after, and as he always insisted on making the final decisions himself, he ignored even the reports from his own field generals. That misjudgment, reinforced by the constant flood of false data coming from British-controlled spies, sealed the fate of the Western Front. Hitler did not lose the war for lack of troops, but for trusting the right lie. Operation Fortitude proved something fundamental. Wars are not won only on the battlefield, but also in the minds of commanders. By convincing Hitler and the German High Command that the attack would come somewhere else, the Allies managed to reduce the number of German troops in Normandy on D-Day, completely disrupt the Wehrmacht's rapid response system, create a permanent sense of uncertainty within the German command, speed up the liberation of France more than a tactical victory. Fortitude was a psychological one, a blow to the ego of a war machine that believed itself invincible. Most of the agents involved in Fortitude never had their names carved into statues or memorials. They worked in anonymity, protected by absolute secrecy, hidden in the basements of British intelligence offices, or pretending to be something they never really were. People like Garbo, who vanished after the war and was only rediscovered decades later, living under a new name in Venezuela, or Agent Zigzag, a thief and con man who became a key piece in British espionage, or the radio operators who for months simulated fake transmissions day and night without rest. Real people with real fears, fighting an invisible war. Operation Fortitude is not just a clever chapter of the Second World War, it is a reminder of how easily reality can be manipulated with surgical precision when you understand what the enemy wants to see, hear, and believe. On the battlefield of ideas, Fortitude was a masterpiece, a disinformation show staged to perfection, and its success cost Germany dearly, not only in soldiers, but in confidence. As Sir Stuart Menzies, head of British intelligence, once said, truth prevailed, but this time it was wearing a mask. Today, Fortitude is studied in military academies, history departments, and intelligence schools as one of the greatest examples of psychological warfare in history. But perhaps its greatest legacy is this: it proved that even truth can be defeated if it is left alone in the open. Because in the Second World War, the difference between victory and defeat may well have been an inflatable tank, a phantom general, and a spy with far too much imagination to be real.